Okay, so firstly, just before I come on, I have to say thank you so much for all the presentations that just came on before me. They're perfectly set up to everything I want to say. So much that I was just talking to Bruno during Mailcon's talk. You are literally as mine, so thank you for that. I realised when I was invited to speak at this meetup that it is 10 years ago to the month that I did my first ever talk in front of a crowd. That talk was about Agile UX. And today, 10 years later, we are still talking about, does Agile fit into UX, or does UX fit into Agile? Still the same conversation. I posed a question which Mailcon kind of recognise a similar sort of question you were asking. Can design be truly Agile? 10 years ago, I was asking that question to this audience, right? And much like you did, I came to the conclusion, of course. So many things fit into it, like being responsive to customers, getting things out there iteratively and working through them. Of course, these things are exactly what designers are good at. That's what we've been doing for years anyway. But I think we need to start asking a slightly different question. I think it's time that we actually move on, because transformation is continuous. The only constant is change, as they say. We've been through so many transformations now. Probably, 30 years ago, digital transformations. Now people are like building websites, they have things on the internet. Technology transformations, data's being connected in the background. We're building our own software. Today, every organization at a certain scale is a technology company. Cars, tractors, they're all building their own software, they're all using their own software. These transformations have happened, and we have to move with those. Most organizations today, and I'm going to put it out there, it's recorded and be on the internet, every organization that's building software is doing Agile. Hands down. If I was talking about it 10 years ago, every organization now is doing Agile. The picture that you showed actually is interesting because it came out in 2001, 23 years ago. We're definitely time to move on to what that next stage looks like. What is after Agile? What are we going to transform into next? What do we need to start thinking about as designers, as project managers, as product managers, as software engineers? What are we thinking about next? Every organization that's doing Agile is mostly in one camp or the other. We have the project model that you may have already heard about, because the majority of the talks today we're talking about how, as designers, we can live and still be effective in this kind of project model. The project model looks like this. We're mostly output-driven. Mostly output-driven. Nearly always role-siloed, hence why we're all here talking. Can dual-track do it? Can tri-track do it? Can quad-track maybe try? We're role-siloed already. There's still loads of handover, and as much as we try and get closely together, there's still a lot of handover between design and engineering in Agile, and a lot of the time, that's because we have to feed the software engineering machine. They're the most expensive people on the team. We have to keep them busy. I do not subscribe to that, and I have another slightly different talk where I complain about that a lot. I do not subscribe to engineers being busy. We do not feed engineers at all. So let's think about this project model. We're role siloed, we're data restricted. Doesn't mean we don't have data, just it's really hard to get. We're being very reactive to the market. We see customers doing, let's do that as well. We have to be reactive because we're in this output-driven mode. We can't be proactive. We're incredibly closely managed. Our line manager tells us what to do. Our directors are giving us directions as well. We'll build this, now you go ahead and do it. That makes us very business-centered, and that's not a bad thing, right? Like, we work for businesses, they pay us salaries, they give us money, do what the business wants. Of course, that's not a bad thing, but if you only do what the business wants, you are never going to be a leader in the field. General requirement gatherers. We take what we know we want to build, we make them into requirements, we build them because we've got output, we've got deadlines. And incredibly highly practical. Again, not such a bad thing. Being practical is really good, it's not a problem at all. But if you're only just really good at doing things because you're in this world, you're never going to be a leader in the field. Leaders are you, by the way, because you're here at 7:45 in the evening trying to learn things and grow. So now you're all leaders, well done. The next model is a product model. This is where we want to get to. If people want to take photographs, I will stand to one side. My name's at the top anyway, so The product model is the next thing that we're transforming to. This is what you have to think about when you're considering what Agile development means. Both these models are Agile, hands down. All organizations are doing Agile software development. Let's say some do it well. Let's say most do not do it too well. There's a talk in there probably. The product model looks different. We're not output driven, we're outcome driven. We know what customers are looking for and want. We're doing all the research around it. We also know what the business wants because they're outcomes too. We're highly collaborative. Our teams are working together, not handing things over. I love the fact that in dual track Agile, like your stories, Lucy, actually, like engineers getting involved in research, engineers being part of the discussion right at the beginning. That's highly collaborative. We're data informed. Let's be clear, we are not data driven. Data driven means that we have our blinkers on and we only follow the data. Being data informed means we take everything around us, all the quant and qual insights we have, or the data we have to drive insights and then build things that we think are right. We're way more proactive because we're an empowered team. We're not closely managed. Empowered teams are really interesting, right? Because you can't just go in and go, hey, now you're empowered. You have to go and do stuff. The organization has to do stuff. They have to help and support and structure you in a way that you are now empowered to solve problems. You're way more customer-centered. You still think about the business, but you also understand what the customers are looking for to drive the business impact you need. And you're problem solvers. You don't just gather requirements and build them. You want to understand problems, customer problems, business problems, technical problems, and go and solve them. Complex problems most of the time. Therefore, you are quite experimental. Experiment and try and learn, build, measure, learn came up as well. When we're thinking about moving to project model to product model, we have to ask a different question than can design, can UX be Agile? Can we live in that world? We have to have a different question to that. For me, there's an arrow there, so I'm going to continue talking about that small arrow. The product model is where about 2% of organizations are. Facebook, because they're not really Meta. Google, because they're not really Alphabet. Amazon, Netflix, all these, the FANGs as you call them, they're all in product model. They don't talk about product model because it's just how they do things. They talk about the Netflix way, they talk about the Airbnb way, right? There's about 2% of organizations over here. That means everyone else, unless you work at one of those, is on the other side. And there's some mix in between as well, right? But we want to move over to this side if you want to innovate, if you want to achieve real customer value, you want to be a leader in the field, you have to start shifting over to this side in some way, okay? The question I think we should be asking instead of can UX live in Agile software development is how do you define a high-performing product team? Answer that question now in your own heads. How do you define, the teams you're working with, how are you defining what high performance looks like in that team? What does it mean to you? Because it's important if you want to be an innovator that you know what good looks like. We always talk, and actually I think Lucy mentioned it as well, like perfection is the enemy of good. That's a saying that we used to use. You need to know what good looks like. You need to know what high performance looks like if you want to start shifting towards that product model. And this is the kind of question we should now be asking. Not do you fit into another system. That system exists, it's everywhere, so you're going to have to say yes to that. It's how do we define together what good looks like. The talk I'm going to give today is going to answer this question for you, from my perspective, of course. It's generic, it's high level, but we're also going to go into some detail about how you can start moving from project to product and a tool at the end. All in 20 minutes, I think it's 10. So, who am I? Firstly, I'm Chris Compston. I'm a product operations consultant, which means I look at an organizational level. How do we organize our teams? How are we structured around the right objectives? What practices, processes do we have in place? What principles do we need to define as an organization? I do a lot of consulting and advisory. I do product model transformations. What a surprise, since I'm talking about it. I also do leadership coaching and individual coaching if anyone's looking for that. And a bunch of workshops. I've worked at some places here, and if you want to connect, that's my QR code. How do you define a high-performing product team? So you've had about 30 seconds, so I assume you all have an answer to this now, but I'll give you mine anyway. We consistently get things to customers that they value enough to pay for. We consistently get things to customers that they value enough to pay for. This is how you define what good looks like. This is how you define high performance in an individual team. Are you doing enough that customers want it, that they will do a thing, that they will pay? It's always about money, it's always about revenue, that they pay for something at the end. This is made out of some clear areas, right? There's 3 areas for me. Get things is the products and services we're building. Whatever it is you we were just talking earlier about being in very, very cold Polish warehouses, trying to build a warehouse management system. I worked in dating as well, right? Completely different user base, completely different mindset. Don't understand either of them. But we consistently get things, the products and services that you're building, to customers, customer value, the value that you're driving for customers, and it really needs to be understood. Now, I assume in this group, quite well understood. In other events I talk about, not as understood as you would hope. But you need to understand. And finally, you need to understand what the business impact is. What are you doing? What are you achieving for the business? Now, for me, because I talk at the high level, a little bit agnostic of industry and teams, it's about paying money, giving money. Revenue is really important. Business impact. Everything you do, if you're not driving some business impact, you are not achieving anything. So this is my statement for high-performing teams. We consistently get things to customers that they value enough to pay for. As I said, repetition is very important, so I assume you all remember that. I said it 3 times. The great thing is, because you're here today, because you're leaders in the field, I'm going to give you some tips and advice and techniques that I've learned over time, I've embraced and seen and experienced over time. Leading indicators of high-performing teams, intrinsic motivators, being empowered, being capable, being aligned. If you've ever read the book Drive by Daniel H. Pink, What Really Motivates Us, he uses very similar words, but I've changed them because they mean something more important to me. I want our teams to be empowered to make the right decisions. I need them to be highly capable, so when we empower them, they can do it. And I want them to be aligned around the needs of the business. Coming up next is strong team health with inclusive and diverse values. It's no good that your teams are just happy about the work they're doing and they're not really successful. If you are not inclusive, you are not diverse. Full stop. End of story. You have to be inclusive. The teams, when we look at them, they have to be inclusive of all minds, of all people, from all backgrounds, all experiences, so that you can say you're diverse. Diverse teams, as probably we know, drive more customer value. What do you do when you drive more customer value? More business impact, more money. Yay. Okay? Continuous learning and improvement practices. Continuous learning. We need growth mindsets. We need to hire and build a culture where continuous learning and improvement is really important. I said before that I don't want to just feed the machine of software engineering. I spoke at a huge financial institute and said, if I ever see someone, doesn't matter what function they're in the office, not a metaphorical office now, in the office, sat down reading a business book and not working, they're the person you should watch because they're going to be really successful. Because they're learning on the job, they're trying to be better, they're trying to learn and do different things, they're trying to grow as an individual. We need continuous learning improvement practices. On the opposite side of that, leading indicator of low-performing teams. Disengaged, disempowered, unaligned. If you ever see people turning cameras off in now remote world that they used to have on, having cameras off is absolutely fine, right? No worries about that. But if you used to have it on, used to engage, and now all of a sudden it's completely dropped off and it's yes and no answers, they're disengaged, the team's going to be low performing. Toxic team dynamics with exclusion and distrust. Exclusion comes in many different ways. Intellectual exclusion. I have a lot of information over here, I'm not going to share it with everyone, because I'm now more powerful. Your team's not going to be successful in that way. And finally, resistance to improvement, learning, and change. The last one's a little bit questionable because change fatigue absolutely happens, but we still need to see people embracing change. And if we start to see change fatigue, then it's a different conversation. But honestly, that's not really enough to just have great high-performing teams, right? What I want people to think about is focusing on increasing the quality of decision-making at every step along the product development lifecycle. How do a little bit more? Maybe we've got a different stream of data coming in. Now we can make better decisions during discovery. Maybe we're testing in a completely different way, and now we've got increased decision-making quality at every single step. The reason I want you to think about that is because if you do this, your team will become more high-performing, And you will be able to enable that product thinking mindset that is required to get you to be in the product model. To do this, we think about the principles of product thinking. So this now is the part where comes in that you can now focus on very specific areas to increase your decision-making quality, to make you a high-performing team, to become a product model organization. This is split up into different areas, so strategically aligned, around the needs of the business. Value-driven, around the needs of the customer. And outcome-focused, so we actually know and be able to measure everything we're doing, so we actually know if we're achieving business success and customer success. And then you apply the lens of business, customers, and approach. Okay, a nice matrix, everything comes in threes. So when you think about the needs of the business, you need to have a good vision. The vision is nothing without an invisible strategy. If your strategy is invisible, no one's going to know about it. Okay, you have to have good vision, clear objectives, and you need to talk about it so much that when someone comes over to you and says, can you please stop? I've heard enough, I understand. That's when you stop. Repetition is very important. Those goals have to be really clear so your teams are aligned around them, but they also have to include the customer. You can't just be business-centered. You can't just say this is what the business needs. You can't just say we're just going to drive for revenue now. Without customers, you don't get revenue, by the way. You need to be customer-centered. It needs to feature somewhere in the vision or on the strategy. And finally, you need empowered teams. And again, as I said before, you can't just say, hey, you're now empowered, go away and do things. You have to put structures in place that allow teams to be empowered and be strategically aligned. If you want to be value-driven thinking about the business, you need product market fit, you need to understand where the product sits in the market, your competitors, the close competitors, the far competitors, the one that are very slightly different to you, how you price things, how you're monetizing. You need to be data informed, as we said before. Getting both quant and qual data into the team is super important because it increases decision-making quality. And we need experimental practices, build, measure, learn. We need to practice experiments with customers in both safe and not so safe environments where things may get a little risky. We may lose some money, but it's a good one because it's a really big bet. And finally, to be outcome focused, when we think about the business, we need to have measurable outcomes. If you don't have measurable outcomes, how on earth do you know what you're doing? You have to measure, you have to set those standards up front. We need good, strong customer feedback loops if you want to be outcome focused with our customers. Going and doing regular research, whatever that might look to you, whatever regular means to your organization. And we need iterative learning. We need about iterative learning and how we get there and how we want to learn together about our customers. It's the only way you're going to become outcome focused. The best teams I've ever worked with think about these two things. Building the right thing, doing good research, understanding what you're going to put out into the market and hoping for the best in some cases, and building the thing right. Internal looking. Retrospectives actually have real value, not did it go well, did it not? How are we going to improve our practices? How are we going to get better? It's called continuous improvement and learning. There's a tool here, shockingly designed and marketed by myself, called the Lean Capability Canvas. You can download it there, it's completely free. In another talk I have, which is slightly longer, I go into quite a good level of detail with an example of this. Essentially, take one of those principles, and they're really hard to pick which is the most important one. Write a belief statement around it, explain to yourselves in a team what your current capabilities are like, and then how you're going to improve. Simple. It's lean because it cuts down waste. That's what lean is, waste focus. I want you to think about this, because it's really important. Sustainable change, i.e. long-term change, that change will always occur, but this is long-term change and sustainable change, is only achieved through empowered continuous improvement. You need to be empowered. The organization and its leaders needs to give you the time and space to carve out, to think about not just how you build the right thing, but also how you build it, building it right. It's really important to do that. You have to be empowered, but you also need, as a group, as people, including myself, continuous improvement mindsets. I want to always continuously improve because I know what high performance looks like. I know if I achieve things for customers with the things I build, there's going to be business impact. Hey, maybe I'll get promotion out of it. Okay? So if you can achieve sustainable change, you have to go and find out how to be empowered and you have to have the right mindset. So finally, let's just review what I spoke about there because it went very quick. This is a 45-minute talk. There's a lot more content. But define what it means to have a high-performing product team. Go and sit down, Think about the products and services you build, the customers and business impact, and define what that looks like. Focus on increasing the quality of decision making with those principles. Use them, understand each one and what it means to you, and try and focus in to increase the quality of decision making across the product development lifecycle. And finally, empowered continuous improvement will get you there, hopefully. You can download these talk slides, and because you're very lucky by coming here today, I will give you the full 45-minute talk slides where I talk about what it means to be effective, what it means to be efficient, and the full example of the Lean Capability Canvas. Thank you very much.